So just to show it again, the zodiac. But here, the Indian text, the Laws of Manu, or the Manava Dharma Shastra, is this ancient text that part of the Vedic supplemental lore. Laws of Manu usually tells you a lot of stuff about how to behave, and Manava Dharma Shastra, Dharma is the proper behavior, and the book of by Manu. And Master had said that Manu lived in the Golden Age, and so in here it actually gives the time, the length of time for the different parts of the yugas. So the Krita, or the Golden Age, the Satya Yuga, consists of 4,000 years. The twilight preceding it consists of as many hundreds, and the twilight following of the same number, meaning that the Golden Age here, up on top, Satya Yuga, like here's the descending Golden Age, that there's a 400-year transition into it, and then a 400-year transition out of it, and 4,000-year proper, so that's a total of 4,800 years, right? So that's how that works. So, and then in the other three ages, with their twilights preceding and following, the thousands and hundreds are diminished by one each. So instead of 4,800, here you're at 3,600, and then going 300 transition here, 300 transition out, with 3,000 years proper in that age. Then here you're going down another count. Now you're from going to 2,400 years, with 200 years here, 200 years exiting. In Kali Yuga, of 1,200 years, you have 100 years into Kali Yuga and 100 out. And then you're at the rock bottom, and then you start back on the next 12,000 year ascending cycle, starting again with 1,200 years and on up. So that's how that works. So these 12,000 years, which thus have been just mentioned as a total of 4 human ages, are called one age of the gods. And one problem with that is that the laws of Manu, like in the Puranas, the old history books of in India, they talk about the age of the gods, thinking that you have to multiply our age by 360 years of age of the gods, and so that's the larger cycle. And so they ignored the real smaller cycle based on precession, and that's how a lot of the mistakes came in. And so here the laws of Manu describe this 4-3-2-1 breakdown length of the yugas. And Master had said that Manu lived during the last golden age. Perhaps they did not use our well-known zodiac to track the progression of the ages at that time, but they must have used something similar. That's the only way to track precession, because that's the movement of the equinox relative to the fixed stars. Wouldn't it be fascinating to know why certain constellations were dropped or added in over the ages? And so the zodiac and precession. The current scientific party line is that the zodiac was not developed until the late Babylonian period, around 600, 700 BC, be the end of the last Kali Yuga, beginning of the last downgoing Kali Yuga here. And they're saying precession was not discovered until 127 BC. But when all these ancient civilizations obviously followed precession and knew about it, it's kind of interesting. But now, as I mentioned earlier, the recent finding at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey suggests it may have started much earlier, because Göbekli Tepe is carbon dated at 10,000 BC, almost 12,000 years ago, and the megalithic pillars contain reliefs of many of those animals that are common to us in the zodiac that the ancients referred to, because they'll refer, like the bull. A lot of the myth talk about the bull. Well, that's that part of the constellation, meaning if the bull is in the they always followed one or the other, the autumnal or the vernal equinox, and I forget which, like the Greeks, I forget which one they followed, but if they talk about the bull, then you would know that would be in that age. I have a picture right here. If we're talking about the bull, Taurus, then that would be in a previous Satya Yuga, and anyway, so, and here, the age of Leo, or the age, like these ages. So, let's see. So some of the animals found at Göbekli Tepe are the lion, Leo, bull, Taurus, scorpion, Scorpius. There's also a bird with a sun-like object in its wing, similar to Egyptian art of 7,000 years later. So we don't know, but we're getting to see that this idea of the zodiac with those represented by these animals goes back a lot longer than we thought. And this is you find this in Sri Yukteswara's book, this chart. Kind of gives you an idea of the different ages. And so here we have it kind of outlined again, Satya Yuga with its transition of 400 years plus 4,000 plus 400, like we just saw in the laws of Manu. So that's basically you just subtract one for each age going down, right? That's what the Manava Dharma Shastra said, and that's how it's supposed to be, and that's the the way the precessional cycle works. And then the old Hindu cyclical calendar, this is where it gets interesting. Sri Yukteswara wrote that in 702 BC marked the end of the last Bronze Age. See, that's right here. That's 702 BC right here, when this Dwapara Yuga ended and Kali Age began. And according to the ancient text, Yudhishthira, remember the Pandavas and the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata, they had the Great War and all that, and Yudhishthira with the Pandavas, they voluntarily, he gave up his throne and with the wise men of his court retired to the Himalayas because Kali Yuga was coming. Nobody wanted to stay there. The wise men, everybody left. The grandson, King Parikshit, took over the throne, and nobody wanted to acknowledge that Kali Yuga was starting. And so what happened is that this wouldn't show. The starting point in the Hindu calendar of each yuga is year one. When we start the era of each yuga, like at 3102 BCE, it's actually February 18th of 3102 BCE, because they had that aligned with the stars perfectly. And so at the Hindu cyclical calendar is actually 5,117 years of Kali Yuga. And you probably wonder why that is. And so what really happened is, when King Parikshit took over in 702 BC, he, instead of starting year one of Kali Yuga, he just kept going with 2401 of Dwapara Yuga. See here at 3102 BC is when the Silver Age ended. That's when everybody knew everything still, that's really high age. And then you're going through 2,400 years of Dwapara Yuga, and now here Yudhishthira retires to the Himalayas, and here King Parikshit says, okay, no, this is going to be 2401, 2402, and we just add this 1,200 years to the 2,400, we get to 3,600, and then we add the 1,200 years of this, we get to 4,800, then we go into here, and now we're at 5,117 years of Kali Yuga, and suddenly they think Kali Yuga must have started back here. right? Because that's what they're saying in essence, because they lost track of what the truth was. They didn't, King Parikshit wasn't brave enough to say, okay, Kali Yuga started here, so he just added more years to this. Instead of starting at year 1 of Kali Yuga, he just called it 2401 of this age and kept going. And then you add all this up, you get to our age at 5,117 this year of what they think of as Kali Yuga. And really no, because Kali Yuga started here, and this is where everything, but the beauty of it, it's everything still leads us back. If you subtract all those dates, 5,117, you subtract everything, it takes you right back to here, which is the secret. That's when the Silver Age ended, and everybody still knew what was happening. And so that's why a lot of people think, oh, the Mahabharata war must have been right here at the end of the Silver Age at 3102 BC. So you get that in some of the history, some of the Indian texts. And that's not true. That's because they got confused in the Dark Ages. And so suddenly, because of this calculation error, we think the Mahabharata war is here. No, it was here. And so that's one of the big confusions. And then they say, well, because it's the year of the gods, you have to multiply it by 360. So the Kali Yuga lasts for 432,000 years. So we're only 5,117 years into Kali Yuga. That's got like 432,000 years to go. Doesn't make me feel very good, But the point, I think what's really happening is, and I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that the Kali Yuga of the larger cycle, and might be the ascending one, started at this point. So the larger cycle does affect us, but that's such a long cycle, you can't do anything with it, really. You just know, okay, we're not in the best of ages, but we are going up in the precessional cycle. We're heading up to Satya Yuga, and we're going to have some good times, But we are in a lower cycle on the bigger one, What's interesting too is that the February 18th, 3102 BCE. Vyasa Steinmetz, one of the authors of this book, a good friend of mine, up at Ananda village, he gave a really excellent talk on this subject. And if you can get a hold of it, because it's part of Ananda, you might be able to find it. Really excellent. And I learned a lot from him on this because he's more of the astronomer. I'm more of the historian on this. Even though I'm an engineer, but we all have our kind of specialties. And Richard Thompson wrote the book Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy, and he showed that this date here, February 18, 3102 BCE, was a unique alignment of planets which the ancients talked about very precisely, and so if you try to find the alignment of the planets as listed, you find that when you take the ones that they seem to know about in the Dark Ages, then you come up on that alignment. If you put it into a software program, then the software program will give you numerous dates when that alignment took place. But then if you add more things like Neptune and Uranus, which were not known to the ancient, in the Dark Ages and things, if you add that in, and then if you add Pluto in, and if you add Ceres, one of the asteroids and things, suddenly, boom, it comes right down to February 18th. So the only way how could they have known that? They must have had incredibly accurate astronomy to give that precise date uniquely. What I find really interesting, since we've just covered this with the 3102 BCE being that special date, what's so amazing is that the Mayans also date their calendar from 3100 BCE, and so do the Hebrews. I think that's just incredible, that they all would know that that was a special day, and it is, because that's when the higher ages ended, and very critical time. And now, also wanted to mention that since I did my doctoral work in the history of religions, it's assumed in the history of religions that throughout all history, man was basically the same as he is now. But with the material we're presenting here, we're saying that's not really true, that's not a proper assumption. And the new assumption is that man's consciousness changes significantly during the 4 ages. And one of the things I studied, Henry Frankfurt did a lot of work in Near East civilizations and things, and he came up with this idea of mythopoeic thought. It kind of ties in a little bit. The idea of even pre-modern man was different in that he felt himself linked with nature and the universe. And I was going to mention, this type of linking with the universe is something that we all have in the higher ages, but that we lose in the dark age. And I'll get a lot more detail into that next talk next week. But I just want to mention that, sometimes, if you're on the path a long time, and only once in a great while you have an experience that kind of stays with you, and maybe this was something of a past life or whatever, but I had this kind of a dream vision which was very amazing, very intense, where I was an American Indian medicine man, and I'm standing there out in this beautiful woods and nature, and there was this fallen tree next to me. I had my hand on it, and I'm feeling myself to be part of the tree, part of the land. Everything was me. It was just not, I wasn't this body, I was this whole landscape. Everything was part of me, And so my body was only a small portion of who I am. And I had this expanded consciousness. And I'm standing there kind of in shock because the white man had just told us that they're taking our land away, that this was their land. And I'm thinking, how can they take our land when I am the land? And this is the way of thinking in the higher consciousness. You don't have a piece of paper that says I own this. It's like we are part of all this. And so I'm thinking this kind of concept that Henry Frankfurt called mythopoeic thought is quite valid in terms of the higher ages. And as our consciousness, expands, we're going to feel more and more in terms of this way, and we feel more responsibility, like we'll be in charge of crops in terms of our consciousness being in the crops and helping them grow. Those are kind of things that we'll be doing rather than what we do now. So, and now, kind of to answer your question a little bit, cycles within cycles. We're covering the first level of the Yugas, the 24,000-year elliptical orbit around our binary star makes sense to us through history, and we'll go through all that. But the next larger cycle of circling the galactic center of the Milky Way is so huge it no longer makes sense in terms of human history. But it still impacts us on a different level. As I said, what age we're in on the larger cycle, which lasts, like the Kali Yuga lasts 432,000 years or so, that does affect us. If that larger cycle were in the golden age, we'd be a lot better off right now. I can guarantee you that. So there's a lot of things happening that are hard to understand, but it's interesting that to go over it, to give you the kind of the complete picture in the Hindu Puranas, the way they present it, is that a kalpa, or day of Brahma, that is the age of the universe, so to say, lasting over 4 billion years, the age of our present universe. And this varies some different calculation. I think Vyasa did some calculations where it came to 34 billion years. Our scientists think of the age of the universe being around 14 billion years. But these are they're all within the same type of ballpark range. A kalpa is composed of 14 manvantaras, and we're in the 7th manvantara of this kalpa, of this age of the universe. So we're about halfway through the age of this universe, according to the Hindu thinking. And each of the manvantaras is divided into 71 divya yugas. That is the 4 ages ascending, 4 ages descending. So there's 71 of those. And each of those divya yugas is 4,320,000 years. And we're in the Kali portion of the 28th of the 71 larger divya yugas. And the cycle below this is the precessional cycle that we're talking about. So there are these larger cycles, and I don't get into them. There's what's his name? One that wrote the book on it escapes me now. Anyway, he has a lot of this information. I can bring it next time. He's done a lot of work on the larger cycle, but he's also part of the older group that still thinks that the Kali Yuga started back like 3102 BC, I believe. And so there are some things that need to be cleared up, and I think Vyasa has pretty much cleared it up the way I presented it. So here's just, I took a little picture from Michael Cremo. He's the person that wrote. He wrote these things, and he gave a talk at CPAC a few years ago. See, I can't seem to point to it, but so here you kind of have the idea that the kalpa, with 14 manvantaras, we're in the 7th manvantara, and then down there on the we're on the 28th of the 71, and then we come down here. We're in Kali Yuga of this one, and then down here is the precessional cycle, 24,000 year cycle that we're familiar with. So there may be some changes to this, I don't know, as we go on, learn more. I'm still not real clear on the larger stuff. I focus on the smaller one because I did my degree in history, and things, and I can deal with that. And then I also want to mention here, this is kind of, I think we're pretty close. We're at a couple more things. There may also be a larger cycle in which the galaxies circle the cosmic axis. Now, the reason I mentioned this, I had an interesting experience working at Northrop Grumman. I was part of the team that works on the James Webb Telescope, the one that's going to replace the Hubble telescope. And so we were in a meeting with John Mather, who is the chief scientist for the James Webb Telescope. He was giving a talk on some of his research. And a couple of years before, I had come across one of the papers published called, in astrophysics, called The Significance of the Largest Scale Cosmic Microwave Background Fluctuations in, that's the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe, WMAP. And what that means is the Wilkinson, the probe is a satellite that's up out in space, and it's the first one or second one that actually mapped the cosmic background radiation of the Big Bang to see how smooth it is across the universe. And the assumption here is that everywhere in space is basically the same. That's the assumption of physics and astronomy. But it turned out when they did this and they published their paper in 2003 that it wasn't the same. that indeed there was actually, they called it the axis of evil because nobody wanted to see this happening, but there was an axis to the universe, and it blew their mind. And then I was listening to looking at other stuff on astronomy over the years, and nobody ever mentioned it. And so here I'm with John Mather, and after his talk, I go up and talk with him because he's one of the top people in this. He's the only engineer to ever win a Nobel Prize. And he did the Nobel Prize in terms of this work on this, like Wilkinson anisotropy probe and all that, and the microwave background. That's his specialty. And so I asked him, I read this paper, is this actually true? Because I don't see it mentioned anywhere else. He says, yes, it's true. There is an axis to the universe. And we don't know yet if we're rotating on the axis. We haven't gotten that far to determine that. But yes, there's an actual axis to the universe. And that blew my mind because think about all the ancient civilizations talk about the cosmic axis, which is kind of the outer reflection of our inner axis of the spine, And so there is such a thing. And if there's such order right from the beginning of the Big Bang, kind of makes you think, well, there must be some higher order, Mm-hmm. So I think that was really exciting. And I'm glad that I got to hear it from the guy that actually did the work, So I just wanted to bring that up in terms of a large cycle, and that'd be a huge. I don't know what kind of cycle that would be. I mean, you think of the entire universe rotating around an axis. I mean, the length of that, I don't know. That might be longer than the universe has been around. So just kind of getting to the end of our first part here. It's just like the great year was observed, or the Yugas, the great year, observed in many ancient cultures, the Greek, Egyptian, the Vedic, the Maya, the Hopi. The ancient Greece believes in distant higher ages and vast cycles of time. A great year consists of the iron, bronze, silver, and golden ages. And I'm sure even before you got onto the path here, you had heard of the golden age. Seems like everybody has. It's kind of almost ingrained in our culture because every ancient culture has that tradition of a golden age. And the Greek philosophers actually described the golden age in detail. Hesiod described the ages of man. The golden age, men lived like gods. All good things were theirs. They harvested their field in contentment amid abundance. And then Hesiod said the world declined. For now is truly a race of iron, and men never rest from labor and sorrow by day. Strength will be right, and reverence will cease to be. So there's a lot more detail in ancient Egypt on this. And then ancient Egypt, they spoke of Zep Tepi, or the first time. Descriptions of this age bear strong similarity to the Greek Golden Age. And they did influence each other quite a bit. And in India, they really had a deep understanding of the cyclical nature of time, and it's tied to precession, as we've just seen. And the Yuga Cycle was a series of ages similar to the Greeks. They both understood it in terms of those 4 ages. Zoroastrians also talk about this. And I wanted to mention that in the one of the things I did my master's degree on pre-Tibetan Buddhist Tantrism, which is kind of a mouthful, but it's like the Tantrism that was developed in India before it came to Tibet. And in there they talk about Sandhya Bhasha, the twilight language. And first on the Rig Veda Samhita, the oldest part of the Vedas, it speaks about the 4 ways of interpreting the Vedas. Only the first way is understandable by those without wisdom. And that is like Kali Yuga, the first way. They don't really have an understanding of the Rig Veda. And then there's 3 higher ways of understanding. And so it's long been known that scriptures in India bear a double meaning or multiple meanings, right? The Mahabharata war is really the war within us between good and evil and all these things. And we have these different levels and also astronomical significance and things like that. And so Sandhya Bhasha is used in Tantrism because language is incapable of expressing the highest experiences of life. And so in Tantrism they often refer to it in terms of sexual symbolism, which really means the bliss of orgasm is really the bliss of the soul. And they cover it up, and they also try to express it in different ways that so we can understand it in a way. But as they say, it's incapable of expressing the highest experience of life, because how can you really tell someone about your spiritual experience? You really can't unless they've had similar experiences. And now in the autobiography of a yogi, very important point where the one, was it the grandson of Lari Mahashai or somebody said, the Mahabharata epic has several knot points of Vyaskudas. Keep the knot points unquestioned, and we find only mythical stories. Leave the knot points unexplained, and we lose a science that India has preserved with superhuman patience after a quest of thousands of years of experiment. And this is so true. And we find so many of these hidden things, like when we're going to talk about next time, all the different ways that the yugas are hidden in these different ways, philosophical and other types of expressions of Hinduism, and they're always in the right order of the yugas, always it's every time. And you begin to realize that this is all hidden deep inside, that you would never, it becomes, it's almost a shock. You begin to realize, hey, this is all there and you never knew it. But it's not obvious, because to them it was obvious. So here, what is this evolution of man through the cycles? What's interesting, in 1901, just when this transition period of the present Dvapara Yuga began, see over here where the transition is when we entered Dvapara Yuga proper in 1898, right here. We went through the 100 years of transition of Kali Yuga, then 200 years of transition into Dvapara Yuga, and in 1898 we entered Dvapara proper. And even though it didn't seem much like it, we still had a lot of growing up to do. But at that time, an amazing book was published called Cosmic Consciousness by Richard Buke. And I found this out from Taramada. She had mentioned the book. It's a Canadian doctor, close friend of Walt Whitman. And he was ready for a deeper understanding of what we now call the perennial man's cosmic sense is increasing with the ascending cycle of the ages. And in his book, he talks about all these different people that have had experience of some kind of experience of cosmic consciousness, and he says this experience is increasing for some reason at this time. And then he goes through also, and he shows for the first time that it's not necessarily a prophet or someone like Jesus or Buddha who has deep experiences, but there are people like Ashoka and who's the Indian king and the one around 1500 or so AD, a very famous Indian Islamic king who had a deep experience, and they all seem to have it around the age of 33 or somewhere around there. What?
The one who built Taj Mahal?
No, not him. No, but anyway, he points out that it's not just spiritual people who have this experience. It's also many like kings and other people and common people have this experience. And then he makes a list of these, and it's kind of the first one to kind of do this, which is exciting. And then he himself had a very amazing experience of this cosmic sense, and he says, all at once, without warning of any kind, he found himself wrapped around, as it were, by a flame-colored cloud. For an instant he thought of fire, some sudden conflagration in the great city. The next instant he knew that the light was within himself. Directly after, there came upon him a sense of exaltation, of immense joyousness, accompanied or immediately followed by an intellectual illumination quite impossible to describe. Into his brain streamed one momentary lightning flash of the Brahmic splendor, which ever since lightened his life. Upon his heart fell one drop of the Brahmic bliss, leaving thenceforward for always an aftertaste of heaven. Pretty amazing, you know. He's trying to portray what an incredible influence this had on his life, you know. So that was kind of one of the first people to start writing about these things. And so what is this evolution of man through the ages? So there's always at least one enlightened soul at the beginning or during each of the four ascending or descending ages who gives the world the necessary teachings for that age. You know, we're going to talk about that some more. And this, I think I'm pretty much done. I just want to mention, because I mentioned the Cosmic Consciousness by Buke, the corresponding books that have just come out recently is Out of the Darkness, From Turmoil to Transformation by Steve Taylor. He also wrote an amazing book called The Fall, where he put together, that was actually his first book, where he put together all the anthropologists and all the scholars' work in history going back thousands of years, where he noticed that they all said the same thing, that prior to 3000 BC there were no wars, there were no conflicts. And you notice that 3000 BC, around that time, that's when the Silver Age ended. This is when all the violence starts. Up here, as we'll see, people are attuned to each other telepathically. And so people don't misunderstand each other because they know what they're thinking. And so this is where things get a lot better. And so he noticed in the fall that's kind of when the fall started, when people started to not get along with each other. And I thought that was really amazing. And then he came out of this book because he had a lot of spiritual experiences, and he started to investigate people. And in this book he finds all these people who have had permanent experience of enlightenment that never went away. And a lot of, he says, out of the darkness, a lot of these people went through a lot of darkness, and then suddenly, boom, they had this experience of bliss. And these are a lot of common people, like we'd say, people just living normal lives. They're not famous people, but also famous people included, But he has a whole list and describes their life and what happened to them, and how once they had this experience, boom, it's permanent. And that's really remarkable. So this is happening now more and more, and that's because we're getting into this next age. And Robert Foreman, Enlightenment Ain't What It's Cracked Up to Be, A Journey of Discovery, Snow, and Jazz in the Soul. He has a great sense of humor, but it's a serious book. I've spoken with him several times, and also wrote a review for him on Amazon for his book. And what's remarkable about it is that he was very depressed in school. This is like about 40 years ago. He's been on the spiritual path for about 40 years or so. And he was very depressed at college, and he heard about the Maharishi, about the meditation and all that. And so he went to one of Maharishi's intensive programs in Mallorca, a 9-month, I think, program, where they were meditating, 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day. And after 2-3 months of this, he started to have the experience of, like, his brain became silent, and other parts of his brain and shut down, till finally there was utter silence. He was living in utter silence. His whole skin, everything became silent, and that was permanent, never went away. And over the years, it's gotten deeper and deeper, where it's expanding. And now, like, he feels like if someone's walking by they're walking by inside of him. They're part of him, his consciousness. And this has been going on for like 40 years or more. It's a permanent state of consciousness. And he's describing to see what it is. And he's showing us what it's like. He says, enlightenment ain't what it's cracked up to be. He's saying that just because you have enlightenment, you still have to learn how to bring it into your daily life. And now think of Paramhansa Yogananda, an autobiography. To me, this was like a amazing experience years ago. I've been on the path for 20, 30 years, and it suddenly came to me that you think when a person goes to study under a saint that like Master studied for 10 years under Sri Yukteswar, the usual thing is you study under him, and at the end of the 10 years you get enlightenment, you go out to the world and teach. Is that what happened with Master? No, it was when Master had been with Sri Yukteswar about a year is when he had that problem where he didn't meditate right, and Sri Yukteswar called him in, and he gave him enlightenment and gave him samadhi. And of course Master had this from past lives already, but he gave him enlightenment at that point, samadhi, and showed him how to access it permanently. And then in the very next chapter, which blows my mind, is the cauliflower robbery, where Master forgets to lock the ashram door and he's reprimanded. Well, he's enlightened, but he had to spend 9 more years in the ashram to learn how to integrate his enlightenment into his daily life. That's a lesson for us. He already had this state from before, but he's teaching us this is what you need to do. Just because you have the state doesn't mean that you're now, it's all over, you're free. No, now you start to incorporate it into your daily life, and that's what he meant by enlightenment ain't what it's cracked up to be. A very valuable book. And here, too busy to meditate? Try the Buddha patch. I'm achieving enlightenment while I clean my toilet. Available in capsule, gel, and suppository. Order it now. Yeah. Operators are standing by. Yeah. So it doesn't seem to work that way. You know what? I'm going to stop at this point because I'm almost there. I just I think I'll just leave that for the next time. So let's stop here, and hopefully you can come back. It gets better actually, because I'm going to cover more interesting things. This was kind of setting up the basis, the groundwork, and then we can really get going. And the third and fourth part will be probably the most fascinating. So, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll continue. And if you have any questions, I've already told you a lot more than I know, so go easy.